When we think of China, we tend to think of chopsticks, a plethora of delicious different foods, Beijing opera, calligraphy, and Kung Fu. The Middle Kingdom has a lot to offer when it comes to climate, cuisine, travel options, tourist destinations, and more. Yes, if you wanted to travel to the northeastern ice winterland of Haerbin or travel to the rural jungle-like southwest of Yunnan province, you'll find a tourist destination to suit your liking so long as you speak adequate Mandarin. Today, in particular, however, we will be visiting Beijing and Xinjiang province. For a country that has always consistently recorded a higher population than the United States, and the United States having the highest recorded crime rate in the world, it should come as no surprise that there are also several prolific Chinese criminals, whether they be blue-collar, white-collar, or just plain violent criminal offenders. However, the individual that we will be discussing today had nothing but sound and fury coursing through his mind for a streak of 17 years. Welcome back to Dark Narratives. On this channel, we cover a lot of true crime and scary stories based on all records available. If this is the kind of content you like, please hit the thumbs up button and consider subscribing. I spend hours making these videos, and today's video in particular required meticulous hours of research to provide the highest level of fact-checking possible in my third language. On the night of March 31st, 1996, in Beijing's Shijingshan district, a guard is on patrol outside of a nuclear power plant. As soon as he turns a corner, he is assaulted and immediately incapacitated by a man with an iron rod. Although he survived the attack, the Type 56 semi-automatic rifle that he was carrying was stolen from him, and the person responsible for the attack escaped. 1 week later, on the evening of April 7th, 1996, at a military unit in Beijing's Shijingshan district, another guard was on patrol when he was shot in his posterior, and then he began limping to the closest barracks that he could while holding back the throbbing pain of a loud gunshot. One more gunshot rang out as the patrolling guard was struck again, chasing his desire to live. Other soldiers came out to survey the situation, but the source of the gunshots could not be identified. Investigators arrived on the scene, but it had been determined that the person responsible for this had slipped away. However, police in all of Beijing were immediately placed on high alert. 1 hour later, a police vehicle was tailing a minivan that had been driving erratically. Suspecting a drunk driver, the police turned on their sirens and signaled for the vehicle to pull over. Immediately, the driver of the minivan stepped outside and opened fire on the police who were already walking towards the minivan. After an exchange of gunshots from both sides, all 4 of the officers were wounded and the driver of the minivan got away. After running ballistic tests of all the bullet casings recovered from both scenes, it was determined that the weapon used was the Type 56 rifle that had been stolen from the wounded patrol guard 1 week prior. However, the identity of the shooter was not known. Almost 2 weeks later, on the evening of April 22nd, 1996, gunshots rang out at Beijing's Fengtai District firing range. 2 guards were on patrol, and neither of them survived the attacks of an elusive aggressor. Investigators discovered that both of the guards had their firearms, weapon holsters, and magazines for their firearms stolen from their lifeless bodies by the attacker. However, at this time in China, many guards carried firearms without live ammunition with them. Within 1 month's time, 4 crimes were committed by an invisible perpetrator, all revolving around the Type 56 rifle that had disappeared on the night of March 31st, 1996. In this attack, however, a fully automatic rifle, known as the Type 81, was taken from the scene. About 3 months later, on the night of July 26, 1996, at Hebei Province's Xushui County, gunshots once again were fired on guards on patrol at another military unit a little bit past midnight as the guards were changing their shifts. 1 guard was wounded, another one died at the scene. With an abundance of military personnel on site, the attacker disappeared, opting not to try to retrieve any weapons. 6 months later, on December 16, 1996, at 12 o'clock in the afternoon in daylight at Deshengmen Tobacco Market in Beijing, a masked gunman appeared with an assault weapon and shot a businesswoman, stealing her very expensive bag from her that was filled with 60,000 Chinese yuan. In an effort to scare away passers-by, the masked gunman fired a sweeping volley of bullets. In addition to the fatality of the young businesswoman, 3 young men were wounded in this attack. The gunman got away once again. Sending the bullet casings to the ballistics experts revealed that these bullets were fired from a Type 81 fully automatic assault rifle. So far, the patterns exhibited by this nefarious actor seem to be manifested as such. Stockpile ammunition, lay low, and then find a way to use these firearms to harm people who have lots of money and then take that money from people who are assumingly entirely unknown to the suspect. The suspect himself seems to be patient, cunning, and able to plan his escapes meticulously in advance. In all of the attacks carried out by this madman so far, police were not able to recover any evidence from him whatsoever. Not even a single fingerprint could be recovered from the scene of any of his crimes. After his last attack on an innocent woman and bystanders, nothing but silence followed. Until July 5th of 1997, that is. This time, there was an armed robbery that took place in a rural city in Xinjiang, in the city of Shihezi, translated as Stone River in English, and a 2-hour drive away from Urumqi. Field Mission 141, the authorities, were alerted to a disturbance for a local weapons armory. From information gathered by Field Mission 141 authorities, they discovered that 2 police dogs at the site were killed, and bullet casings matched the type that were commonly used by Type 81 automatic rifles. This case was treated as a robbery by the Field Mission, since there was no loss of human life. However, Field Mission 141 noted it was very strange that rifles were used to kill police dogs. Even more strange is the lack of communication between Beijing and Urumqi authorities at this time. Neither party was aware that there were crimes being committed in Xinjiang with the same firearms that were used in Beijing. 1 month later, on August 8th, Field Mission 149 received a phone call with regards to more gunshots being heard. This time, Shihezi authorities were also alerted, and they put 2 and 2 together to realize that the same person responsible for killing the police dogs and looting their armory 1 month prior was also highly likely the same person responsible for this attack. 1 security guard and 1 police officer were killed in their duty room in the police district. The police officer on duty was in possession of a Type 54 pistol, but it was taken from him after he had deceased at the scene. Police in Xinjiang were becoming nervous because soon to take place was the annual Xinjiang International Trade Fair in September. They could expect many foreigners from neighboring countries like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, and other nations to attend, and they wanted everyone to be safe and feel safe. And they wouldn't want any foreigners going back to their own countries, stating their fear of mass shootings in their visits to China. Unfortunately, this fear became all too real sooner than expected. On August 19, 1997, outside of the Urumqi Business Center, an old man and a young man had just finished a business deal and were both counting their money under a telephone pole when they were suddenly approached by 2 people. 2 gunshots were fired, the money they were counting was taken, and the 2 gunmen had fled the scene. In an effort to scare everyone as far away from the gunmen as they could, they fired gunshots while running away. They ran into the sports field of a school nearby, and 2 unlucky teenage students saw them and were shot on sight. In 20 minutes at the scene, 14 bullets were fired, 7 people lost their lives, and the pair of attackers were never seen together again. With an attack like this one taking place, you can bet Beijing was paying attention and then sent their own investigators to the scene of the crime. Ballistics testing of the shell casings recovered in the attack in Urumqi indicated that the weapons used were both the same weapons that were very likely stolen from the guards of various military and government outposts in Beijing. However, the one blaring difference is that this is the first attack orchestrated by a duo and not a lone individual. On August 31st, 1997, on a day that was almost entirely peaceful, 2 shepherds were strolling around Tianshi Lake, a popular tourist attraction near Urumqi. They were walking around the forests and hills near the lake when they suddenly came across a dead body. When the shepherds discovered the dead body, they called the police and informed them of what they had found. The deceased had clearly visible gunshot wounds. Detectives arrived on the scene, and shell casings for both a Type 54 pistol and a Type 81 automatic assault rifle were both recovered. The outward appearance of the corpse was different from others who died from these types of gunshot wounds. He didn't have the appearance of someone that would have access to these types of firearms. For example, he didn't look like a security guard, he didn't look like a soldier, and he didn't look like a police officer. By now, the Beijing police and the Xinjiang police put together a small task force specifically to find and stop this cold-blooded monster, and an officer from the Xinjiang Armed Police 6th Detachment stated that just by looking at the body, he knew who this victim was, Wu Ziming. When asked how this officer knew of the deceased, he said that there were two individuals who had approached him requesting bullets and ammunition. One was named Bai Baoshan and the other was named Wu Ziming. The officer responded to both of them when he asked, "Why would you want these bullets?" And they simply looked at him plainly and said, "We would like to go hunting for wild boars in Beijing." This officer thought, it doesn't matter if there are wild boars in Beijing or not. Why on earth are they asking me for bullets and ammunition? Wu Ziming had a criminal record and served a prison sentence in Xinjiang at one point. After this internal discussion amongst this joint operation, and to obtain a more rapid verification method of the deceased person found at Tianshi Mountain, the police force then went to find Wu Ziming's father, whom they were able to locate by searching for Wu Ziming's prison records. When detectives arrived at his father's home, they showed him a picture of their deceased person of interest, now turned victim. The old man that they found stared at the photo for a long time and then began to quietly shed tears, stating that it was indeed Wu Ziming. Wu Ziming said to his father, "I will go away for a while to do some long-term work. If I do not return by October of this year, call the police and file a missing persons report. The person responsible for my disappearance will be the man in this journal." And that's when the police got the lucky break they were looking for. Inside the journal, there were only two lines written on the first page of it: Bai Baoshan, and the residential address of Bai Baoshan living in Beijing. Police dispatched 4 cars of police officers and detectives to apprehend and question Bai Baoshan. This operation was carried out at night, so when police arrived at his residence in Beijing, he was only wearing his underpants while his mother was present in their apartment. On the evening of October 16, 1997, 4 detectives from the Beijing Police Department knocked on his door and entered the apartment, stating up front that they arrived to tell him that his hukou, a distinct Chinese identification document, had been approved and that he was needed to come sign some papers at the police station to retrieve it. He said to the officers, "Please let me get dressed first, and I'll go with you all." In the closet where he was getting dressed later, a Type 54 pistol was recovered, and it is believed that he did not engage in any acts of violence in his residence, specifically due to the presence of his mother. As soon as he was escorted outside of the apartment complex, he was placed in handcuffs with heavily armed police officers with assault rifles present. Upon interrogation, he confessed to everything that had taken place. When asked for his motivations, there were 3 main reasons he went on his crime spree. Reason number 1. At the age of 25, he was jailed for larceny and sentenced to 4 years in prison. 2 years into serving his sentence, however, an accomplice in this act of larceny exposed more of his crimes in exchange for a reduced sentence of his own. You see, before being convicted in this act of larceny, he was involved in a highway robbery using a gun in the 1980s, giving him an increased sentence of 10 years more in prison. The whole reason why he did a highway robbery and an act of larceny is because he already had a wife and twins that he had to support, and the job that him and his wife both had did not make enough money to pay all of the bills that they were incurring. Number 2. After he got out of prison, he no longer had hukou, which is a very distinct form of Chinese identification, and he wanted to do business, but without hukou, which is a basic form of identification, this was impossible. Reason number 3. He was previously married, as we stated before, and he also had twins, 1 boy and 1 girl. While he was in prison in approximately 1991, still serving that sentence before his rampage in Xinjiang, Hebei, and Beijing could begin, he received a letter from his daughter saying that both her and her twin brother were being bullied and laughed at in school and society because their father is a criminal in prison. The letter also stated that their new stepfather was also abusing both of them and their mother. This letter motivated him to accumulate 3 million Chinese yuan to send to both of his children to escape the life that he had created for them by becoming a criminal in the first place. During interrogation, he also confessed and named an accomplice, a young woman by the name of Xie Zongfen, who was already married with 2 children. Xie Zongfen was sentenced to 12 years in prison for robbery and assisting in cover-up in her role in assisting Bai Baoshan. Bai Baoshan was convicted of all 15 incidents of murder and was sentenced to capital punishment. Bai Baoshan was officially executed on May 6th of 1998, presumably by the same kind of rifle that he had used to attack innocent people with a gunshot wound to the back of his head. Xie Zongfen was released from prison after finishing her sentence at an unknown date, and a news report published in 2020 states that she returned to the same city where Wu Ziming's dead body was found, Shihezi City, Xinjiang Province. There is no word on what she is doing to earn a living for herself. That concludes this episode of Dark Narratives. In the comments, I would like to know what you all think of the swiftness of the justice system in China when it comes to capital punishment. Less than 1 year after his arrest, Bai Baoshan was captured, interrogated, convicted, and executed. If you learned something new today, remember to smash the like button, and if you think you'll be back for another video, please consider subscribing. As always, remember that every day is a new opportunity to see the light. Until next time, goodbye.